it's been a labor of love for me. And when I was making this talk, and mind you, you all will appreciate this because I stayed up until about 4 a.m. doing this. So pre-med life never really leaves you. I tried my best to kind of go back to where you all were in my own life. And it was a very therapeutic process, to be very honest, just because you forget a lot. I don't know how much of that is just PTSD. I don't know how much of that is just so much information that you just can't keep it all in. So I want to thank you all for letting me do this for you. I definitely realized that you could all be sleeping in, well deserved, but you chose to join me instead. So I appreciate that and I thank you for that. And I can tell you, I hope this is worth your while as much as it was mine. A little about me. Like they mentioned, I am currently practicing in Northern Virginia. I'm originally from Maryland, and I did all of my training right outside of Maryland and DC, which we call the DMV area, so DC, Maryland, Virginia. So I went to the George Washington University for college, which is where you guys are. That is where the intensity begins and where it certainly does not end. So that feeling, that intenseness that you have now will only continue, and to be quite frank, at times gets a little worse. So buckle up because you all are in for quite a crazy ride. Like I said, pre-med, undergrad, it's just the beginning, right? So the idea of doing your best and wanting your best is all from that moment. Now, I also, which I'll go into that, that's where I kind of also believe that we start to change and we start to lose ourselves in medicine a little bit because it's been taught to us. So when I was in med school, you know, we really didn't have much about the business of medicine. There was really no social media at that time. There was Facebook, there was definitely no Instagram. And so it was a big spot that was lacking. And specifically regarding just business, private practice, and social media. And so I don't know if medicine has basically caught up. I think you guys are doing a great job of kind of proactively doing this for yourselves. But in terms of where I was, none of this was available. This wasn't even a conversation. Soon after college, I obviously went to med school. I did not take a year off. I did major in Spanish language and literature, and my biggest regret is actually not studying abroad for a year and taking a gap year. But that is neither here nor there anymore. But I, you know, was so committed to medicine that I really had my blinders on. But I did get to do something kind of out of the ordinary, out of the box, which kind of goes along with my personality, which I hope you'll understand. And then shortly after that, after finishing GW Med, I went on to do a prelim year or an intern year because I was accepted into ophthalmology. And so you have to do 1 year of a prelim year, either in surgery or medicine. I chose medicine at MedStar in Georgetown, again, inside DC. After intern year was my ophthalmology residency, which was basically the career path that I chose. I became more interested in ophthalmology when I would say kind of later in the game in med school. There are certain specialties that are early decision or early match. And so ophthalmology and neurology were the two that I can think of at the time. And so I kind of was late in the game because I knew I wanted to do surgery, but I went from wanting to do pediatrics to surgery, and I kind of lost my way a little bit until I found ophthalmology. So needless to say, there's really no rush in kind of figuring out what you want to do. It's a good idea to kind of understand surgery or not, but don't feel like if you don't know what you want to do, you're behind. I always felt that way in med school. You know, people came in just saying, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. And I just didn't know. And I think it actually worked to my benefit because I was open to everything versus being very selective and closed-minded. Shortly after ophthalmology residency, which was 3 years, so 1 year of medicine, prelim, and then 3 years of ophthalmology, I did a fellowship in oculofacial plastic surgery. There's about 20 fellowships per year in this American Society of Ophthalmic Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. And so I was lucky enough to get accepted to one of those fellowships. It's a 2-year fellowship. And so it's kind of changed. Before oculoplastics was truly just basically functional. So what we say functional, I mean trauma, reconstructive, really nothing cosmetic. And so times have really changed because we've entered a turf war when it comes to cosmetics and medicine in general. You're seeing a lot of OB-GYNs, a lot of general surgeons converting to cosmetics. They're going back and doing a cosmetic surgery fellowship just because of reimbursement rates, which I'm hoping will change, but we're really seeing a weird trend in medicine. And so oculoplastics also had to follow that trend because there was a lot of plastic surgeons, or not even plastic surgeons, performing eyelid surgery, brow surgery, and they really didn't have the expertise. And so what oculoplastics decided to do was teach us full face surgery. And so what was basically a fellowship in just purely oculoplastics or eyelid and orbit reconstructive surgery became a full cosmetic, facial cosmetic surgery fellowship as well. And so the issue being that not every fellowship caught on to that trend, and some caught on a little bit later than others. And so there's a bit of a disconnect within oculoplastics and fellowships itself, because not all of them have cosmetic training. Luckily, I was able to kind of pursue that on my own. My fellowship was not having cosmetics, but I certainly was interested in it. And again, that just goes back to being open and never just being taught what you're given. And that would be probably my best advice, is that I feel like, and this will kind of go into the social media talk, is that medicine is pretty antiquated, and you guys are very intellectual, and the things that you know, I don't know. And that's pretty exciting for medicine, because if we continue the same path and keep teaching our students the same things that we were taught, then, you know, unlike any other field, we don't progress. And so I pushed to get cosmetic training. I drove an hour away on my days off to do cosmetic training. And so despite that, I still didn't get much, but I wanted it and I pushed for it. And so it ended up being more work for me, but ultimately it ended up being much more beneficial over time. And so after fellowship, I was offered a job to do a private practice position in Northern Virginia, again, about 15 minutes outside of DC, so I really never left home. And so this practice, interestingly enough, the idea was that I would do about 3 days of functional and then 2 days of cosmetic. And the idea really was that I was going to take over the functional or the medical aspect of my partner's oculofacial plastic surgery, and that she would in fact become purely cosmetic and I would not. And that was an open conversation that I had and I agreed to, because I didn't really know what percentage I wanted to stay. And again, I wanted to stay open. And so I agreed to that. And my goal was to kind of stay 50-50, cosmetic and functional, knowing that I would have to probably work a little bit harder to get to that 50% for cosmetic. But again, I was up for the challenge. So like I said, the first 3 years, it's tough. Medicine doesn't get easier. I used to always think, well, once I get into fellowship, once I become an attending, once I become this, it's all training you really to kind of get you prepared for the same reality over and over again, which is you hit the ground hard and then you have to learn to rise up. And so that's basically medicine, in my opinion, and that's how they train us, is that they throw anything at us and we're taught to rise up each time. And you can kind of see that with what's happening with COVID right now, right? You see how doctors are being treated and how we're kind of put last yet again, and we're still rising up. So that to me is quite sad, but also quite exciting, because it just shows you what strength that you're taught and what you're given. And that is a gift if it's used correctly. So like I said, I had very little experience. And, you know, I was expected to kind of push a little bit more on the cosmetics because that was the money maker, obviously, just given the reimbursement rates. But deep down, I kind of just was open to whatever was going to happen. But I wanted it, right? So I read, I traveled, I went to Delray, I went to Richmond, I went to California, I looked up cosmetic surgeons that I look up to, and I just picked their brain. And some were more open than others. The ones that I found are still my very close friends to this day. I still text them. They even sometimes text me for advice. So those are the things that, you know, your friends now may end up, you know, helping you down the road. So the idea of kind of competition where you tear each other down really needs to be reevaluated. I can tell you you that's the one thing that I never did. And it was certainly done to me, was that you'll see in medicine, it's all competition, right? And so I had notes stolen from me. I had wrong notes given to me, and it never changed the end result. And so, you keep pushing and you keep trying and you don't stop, because I think that's what is taught to you, is that not stopping mentality, but it doesn't mean it has to be at other people's expense. And so little by little, it was that grind, it was that process that kind of created this following. And it was very microscopic at first. I mean, within the DMV, I started to get a little bit of reputation, but it wasn't anything exciting. And mind you, my partner was about 15 years older than me, with 20 years of cosmetic surgery and training under her belt. And here I was, this brand new little girl who knew nothing. Other than I was pretty darn confident in my functional training, because I had really good training. And so, that confidence I had to build within myself, because cosmetic patients are very rough. Reviews are very hard. The internet is now an area for anything, right? It's the wild, wild west. So you really are entering a war zone. And so if you're not very, very well trained, you have nothing to stand on. And so I will tell you, in order to be the best, you have to learn from the best. And again, I will echo, do not burn a bridge. Do not step on each other's toes. It is not worth it. And it will ultimately hurt you in the end. So kind of going back to social media now, because obviously that's the topic of this. You can see this is stuff that I've thought about for a really long time and have never been given the platform to speak about. So I'm tending to go off a little bit off topic, but again, I think all things I wish someone told me. So, I started to look at social media. Now, I was very late in joining Facebook. I was very late in joining Instagram. I really didn't like the idea, which seems really odd, right? Because I'm speaking to a generation who grew up with this, but I didn't. I had a cell phone when I was in college. I won't tell you how old I am, but you can tell that I'm probably older than most of you. And so it was odd. Facebook was a local college thing, right? And so each college had a Facebook thing, but it really wasn't universal yet. And so I just kind of thought it was silly. I didn't understand, and I still don't really understand the oversharing aspect of it. The idea of me needing to know your every move. And I would always say, well, if I wanted to know it, I would just ask. Why do I have to find out, every waking second what you're doing? And so I never loved the idea of social media. So I was always very late into it. And to be honest, I really hated the influencer market. And I use the word hate in a very different capacity. I meant the people who have a voice without really knowing anything, without having the training, without really being the kind of the expert in a field, right? We've trained for so long and we're experts in our field, and yet we have these influencers who know nothing and will say things like, well, a lot of you have asked about my skincare routine. Well, what do you know about skincare? You know nothing. The only thing you know is that you have about, 100,000 followers. And so that really irritated me. And so I still studied the influencers. I still, studied the bloggers, because I wanted to know, why was their voice so big? And that was kind of the start of my attention. And obviously I wasn't going to model myself after a blogger. So I turned my attention to doctors who I knew had a strong following. And so the top three in my head at the time, and this is obviously a very changing market, because now we have more and more doctors becoming influencers. But when I was starting, it was not very many. And even these three were not, well known like they are right now. And so I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know these three, or at least one of the three. And Dr. Sheila Nazarian, I think, really changed it for females, and I give her a lot of credit. And then obviously Dr. Ben Tolley and Dr. Deepak Dugar, who was actually a classmate of mine at GW in college and in med school. So like I told you, don't ever burn a bridge, because Deepak and I send each other patients. He lives in LA, I'm in DC/Virginia, and our patients fly to see one another. And so that is the reality that we live in right now. So your bridges now are even more important than they've ever been. And so just to kind of show you what I would look at. And so, obviously this is a screenshot, but I follow Dr. Sheila Nazarian. I think any female in medicine or pre-med should look at Dr. Sheila Nazarian very carefully, because she presents one possible brand. And that brand as a female is very different than a male. And I want to show you that difference really, really quickly. Basically, with Sheila Nazarian, it became this idea of a female, right? And so Sheila Nazarian, from what I've understood from her, is she was a model. She was an ex-ballerina, and now she is a body plastic surgeon. So when you say that to someone, that like taken aback, wow, she can do all that and she looks like that and she's a doctor. That's what I love about Sheila Nazarian, is that she kind of breaks that mold for females, is that you can look like an influencer, like a blogger, but you can be more than that. And so Dr. Nazarian kind of broke that mold for females, but there's a little bit of a gap for me personally with Dr. Nazarian that I don't know how it can be filled as females, and I'll touch on that a little bit. She now has a show on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, I would watch it. It's a series. And what Dr. Nazarian does is something a little different. And so she has different Instagram handles for different things, right? So this is Dr. Nazarian just kind of overall. And then she has one for her before and afters. And then she has one as basically kind of like a blogger influencer where she's dressed up. You know, she's wearing the trendiest, the latest and greatest. And then it's basically this collective thing, and one for her skincare line that is the brand of the Nazarian Institute, or the Nazarian brand. And so what she's basically trying to do is create an entire complex brand, which, as you can see, is a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work to have to handle all those Instagram accounts and try to prove that you're all of those things as a female, right? And so I want to compare that now to excuse me, I think I just got, here we go. Dr. Ben Tolley. And so Dr. Tolley has basically one Instagram account. And he does have another Instagram account for a nurse that injects with him, but it's really just one. And so Ben Tolley is one in all of this Instagram profile. He's not trying to prove anything to you. He's not trying to prove that he can be this and he can be that and he can be this. He's just Dr. Ben Tolley. And you don't have to like the way he looks. You don't have to like the way he talks. You just have to like him. And that's all that matters. And he's quite successful. He has about the same number of followers as Dr. Nazarian does. And I will tell you that Dr. Nazarian doesn't have all the same number of followers in every single one of her accounts. And so Dr. Ben Tolley has one account. He is one person. He doesn't have to prove anything to everyone. And so I started to kind of think of that. I thought, well, that's weird. Well, Dr. Nazarian has to have 10 accounts, and she has to have a Netflix special, and she has to have this. But Dr. Ben Tolley doesn't have to do that. And so then I thought, okay, well, maybe they're a little bit older than me. So, you know, let me look at someone younger who has more growth, more success on social media than I do, who's also a surgeon. And so the only person that I knew was my friend, Dr. Deepak Dugar, who, again, I went to med school with and college with. And so Dr. Dugar does this really cool thing because he's friends with the, you know, everyone LA. And so he doesn't show all his stories to everyone. So when I click a green one, sometimes I've seen Kim or Kanye with him, and it's like, oh my God, that's Deepak. But it's the same thing, right? Dr. Dugar only has one. Now, he does have a scarless rhinoplasty, but it's not much different than this. The Scarless Rhinoplasty Institute is essentially his sub-brand. You know, right now he's working with a partner, which I really kind of understand. And so he's trying to create his own name within this bigger kind of name. So he works with, or he's partners with Dr. Raj Kanodia, who is basically, you know, the facial plastic surgeon of LA. And so Deepak has a little bit of a bigger challenge just because he's trying to create this brand within a brand. And so he's also younger. So, you know, as a female in medicine, and specifically as a female in social media, our job is a lot harder because you have to prove a lot more. You have to prove that you can do it all. And I had a really big issue with that. I had a really big issue with that because I thought, well, why do I have to do it all? Why don't the doctors that are males have to do it all? Why can they just have one Instagram account? They can look like whatever they want. They can put the camera on their face. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
There's someone's mic on. I hear a child. I'm so sorry. I feel you. I'm hiding in my bedroom. So long story short, it became a little bit of an issue for me in my mind, just because I thought, well, is that fair? Did we create that as a society? Did we create that in medicine? And so, I think it's a little bit of both. And my goal, obviously, is for everyone to be changed from this, but specifically, my attention is always to females in medicine. And this is no way to say that males aren't important, but our path is much more difficult than men. And no one's really said it, no one's willing to say it. And I think that has to change, because there is a big difference. The expectations are different, we are different, and we're expected to do it all and take more and more and more. And I had a really big issue with that. And so I didn't really know what I was doing at this point. I just saw patterns, but I didn't know what it meant. I just saw things that kind of raised my eyebrow, but I didn't know how to make sense of it. And so I started to create my brand, and I didn't really know what that meant, right? I was basically this young doctor. All I knew was my training. All I knew is, the fact that I was told to be an oculofacial plastic surgeon, and here I was, and why weren't these patients listening to me? And so I realized that I had to kind of go with the times. Like I said, I was very delayed. I was a little bit resistant to it for a long time, until I realized that it's an animal that I have to turn my head towards. And so I did. And I kept thinking, I have to create this virtual self. And there's so many selves that we're trained to be, in med school. I had, and I don't know if you guys have this, but it's called practice of medicine, where we're taught to be basically ethical doctors. We're taught how to speak to patients. I always thought that was so weird, because I thought, well, how are we supposed to be taught that? Shouldn't that be natural? Shouldn't there just be this human connection? How are we taught? Why has it become so robotic? And the same thing was happening in social media, where we had to become extensions of ourselves that wasn't really us. And so if you haven't watched Social Dilemma, I would tell you to watch it, because it really kind of hits that. It's a documentary on Netflix, but I think it's something for your generation to understand, that we are all kind of becoming these artificial beings of who we truly are. And so that can be good or bad, because you can use that power for good or for evil. And unfortunately, I've seen both. And so what you're seeing now is basically the wild, wild west, right? You're seeing providers, nurses, even doctors, PAs who are posting as experts, and they're truly not experts. They're face tuning their before and afters. They're, filtering their patients. They're filtering themselves. They're giving us this virtual representation of what their reality is, or what they want it to be, when it's certainly not fact. And so we as physicians and future physicians have an oath to our patients that we will do no harm. That's the Hippocratic oath that you'll take when you graduate. Med school is that when you become a doctor, when you take that Hippocratic oath, you have basically devoted your life to your patients. And that's not a small thing that you're doing. This is not about money. This is not about power. And if anyone goes into any of, to medicine for any of those two reasons, you will have a very harsh reality in front of you. And so how could I create a brand or a virtual self that still stood by that Hippocratic oath? And to be quite frank, my personal oath. Why do we take an oath that says we should do no harm? Shouldn't we all take that oath as human beings? And so I promised myself one thing. I said, okay, well, let's not make this a whole, existential crisis. Let's just do it and see what happens. Just kind of like I went into med school and residency. I really didn't know what I wanted yet. I just kind of took the next step. And it's very overwhelming if you try to take all the steps in medicine. And so it's always just taking the next step. It's the next exam. It's the next due date. It's the next. Don't think about step 3 when you're taking step 1. And so, I just said, okay, well, let's just do it and see what happens. And so January 2016 is when I decided. Now, 1 year later, I would have my daughter. So I wasn't pregnant yet, but I started this basically pre-child, and so there was a lot more time on my hands. Hence me hiding in my bedroom with my door locked. But we won't go into that. So January 2016, I was 4 months into practice and the cosmetic numbers weren't changing. I was spending at that point, as a new doctor, you're costing the practice money. And so as, pre-med students, as doctors, we have this like major guilt, like, oh my God, I'm such a burden. We're selfless. And so you grind to try to help the practice. And so I just told myself, let me try this. Let me do something so I can help the practice at that point, really not knowing that it was the brand building at the same time, although it was something I was playing with, like I said. And so I started to work. I promised myself that I was going to post every single day. I promised that I was going to respond to every direct message. I was going to respond to every comment. I was going to go and engage other followers, and it was exhausting. I don't know how it is done every day. I don't know how you guys scroll through it. It is so exhausting because it's like your brain is being pulled in 5,000 different directions. And mind you, I'm working. I'm a surgeon. I'm in the OR. I'm taking call. I was exhausted, but I did it. And then on top of that, you still have the word of mouth referral. So you have to go to these events. You have to meet people. You have to go to these who's who. We even was not my decision. My partner hired a PR firm. And so they were taking us around and putting us in magazines. And it was a lot. And so what I learned is that, you have to give in order to receive. And so I gave out a lot of free stuff. I gave out free products. I did free injections. I never did free surgery because that was the one thing that was very holy to me. And it was my value. So I wasn't ready to give that, nor will I ever. And so I just asked and I gave, and I had to turn to bloggers who I didn't necessarily love, but I told them, come in, I'll inject you for free if you post blah, 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 blah. And so it started to happen. And it was by no means my intention, but it started to kind of take shape. It wasn't a brand that I had visualized. It wasn't a brand that I knew. It just started to take shape to a point where I have a business account, and I thought about putting my your little analytics that, comes with a business account of the timing of my engagement and that. And I don't look at any of those things, which is probably not a good thing to admit, but the brand has already, in my opinion, taken shape for me. And so what I want to do is ensure that the brand is pure, and I do not want to be skewed by my followers wanting something else. And so, yes, could I use that to my advantage to direct more patients and more engagement to me? Sure, but that's not my job. I'm not a social media hacker. I am not a growth hacker or whatever they call them. I'm a surgeon. And so I have to stay pure to my brand. And so it just started to become this very natural, organic process where I was just posting the same content without even realizing it. And so my content became my before and afters, my family, which is something that I'll discuss later, of a dilemma of oversharing, quotes, things that inspired me, selfies, or me doing things. And I always kind of felt weird because I'm not the selfie generation, but I did it, right? It was stepping out of my comfort zone and just saying like, well, that seems like kind of like very self-righteous for me to post a picture of myself. And it took a little bit of pushing from my husband, but I did it just because it was the trend and just because it was an experiment. But again, I always tried to stay true to who I was, despite doing something that necessarily wasn't super comfortable for me. And so the only way that I knew as a surgeon who was so objective in my life was to quantify it. And so, PR companies have a very cute way of saying things like, well, you just don't know the ROI because it's so different. It's so difficult. How do you know that my influence didn't come into your office? And so I never really love that. And that's why I don't necessarily like the idea of ever having PR ever again, because it needs to be quantified. You need to give me markers, numbers. I need objective data. And as scientists, that's what you need to be hit with, right? And I'll kind of go into that because you're not going to do this on your own if you do this. You're going to do this with a team. And so in order to do it effectively, you need proof. You need numbers. And so at that point, I didn't have a team. I had myself and I had my electronic medical record. And so we had a very good one. We have a very good electronic medical record that can basically quantify everything. And so when a patient calls the office, the first question is, after name and what are you coming in for, blah, 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 is how did you hear about us? And they'll say, well, a friend. Okay, well, then who's that friend? How did that friend hear about us? And so we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have Google, we have all of them. And it's the office's job to kind of really nitpick that question. And I harp on that. I say, when you answer the phone, that is probably the second most important question outside of what are you coming in for / is this an emergency that I need to tell the doctor right away? But 2, how did you hear about us? And that's purely for cosmetic, because when it comes to medicine and functional, it's still very much word of mouth. And so I love that that's still protected in medicine, because that's good old fashioned, just good work, right? So another doctor refers to you or another patient refers to you because they saw your work. And so that is still protected, which I think is great. And I think that's something that needs to be protected. So don't discount that. Don't discount the one-on-one interactions, the going to events, stuff like that, because you really want patients to meet you and to understand you and to even see your work. And so the referral sources change, right? Remember, I didn't come from the time of Instagram. I came in the time where, Facebook had just started. Google is becoming kind of like the search engine, blah, blah, blah. And so we're all of a sudden the referral sources started to go from Google and Yelp and word of mouth to Instagram and word of mouth. So it was a shift that I was actively seeing. And the other crazy thing was that my conversion rates were over double the national average. And this is purely for cosmetic conversion rates. That means when a patient comes in for a consult, number one is I time the amount of time it takes for conversion, which I think is very important also, because that also goes back to the theory of how much social media influences. And number 2, how often you close, meaning a patient that comes in, what you offer them, what you advise them to do, obviously with them, and you're guiding them to the right decision, that they actually go for it. And so that was psychotic to me, because no other surgeon that I knew in my area had that. And I was the only surgeon at this time on the East Coast. Mind you, I don't live in LA, I don't live in Miami, I don't live in New York. I live in Northern Virginia, where this wasn't really being done. And so I was comparing the conversion rates. And so yes, there were some great surgeons who are older than me who have really good conversion rates, but that's because they've had more time to develop word of mouth, but I haven't, right? And so why was my conversion rate starting to reach the same amount of time as a surgeon who was 10 to 20 years plus my senior? And so the only factor was social media. And so this is what becomes the dangerous phase, is because all of a sudden you're seeing this huge spike and then you want to feed it more. And this is when you can lose yourself. This is when you can become no longer pure, right? Because you're seeing this little mini microcosm become a little bit of a bigger world. And so you want to keep feeding it. I call Instagram, or the gram, I call it the beast who knows no boundaries. So you give it some, it wants more, right? It builds tolerance to the amount that you gave. And so just like in your pharmacokinetics, you know that certain receptors, when they're filled, boom, the cell makes new ones, whatever organ makes new ones, so the tolerance increases. And so that's exactly the analogy of social media. All of a sudden, people needed more drug to get the same effect, the same high, and I was their drug. So they wanted more posts, more, respond faster. Why don't you respond to my DM? They would call the office. It became more. And then what's also very difficult for us is that because we live in this little bubble for so long, the first time when a patient gets excited to meet us or kind of takes a step back and makes you feel like you're a celebrity, it's a weird feeling. And it's something that I think can become very dangerous because we are not celebrities. We have a code of ethics. I do not ever want to be compared to a celebrity to a point where a patient says, it's like meeting a celebrity. I stop them and I say, I am your doctor. I am not a celebrity, period. Do not put me on a pedestal, period. Because it's a very dangerous relationship. That means that that patient is giving you all of their power, everything to you, and you have the decision-making capacity for that patient. And like I said, in the wrong hands, that can be used for bad. And so I started to notice that shift even within myself, that was starting to happen to me. And I was not going on the right path for me personally. And so what I started to see was that old patients all of a sudden were diehard loyal. These are patients that had left and seen another doctor for injections and maybe even loved that doctor. But because they didn't have my following, they came back. They wanted to be my patient now because of my following. So it's a weird shift that happens. And I will tell you, patients don't even realize that shift is happening. And so what I realized, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. And so there is that point where you can fall, right? And so I was then faced with a crossroads where I could continue that path, right? Of, oh my God, I'm so great. I'm a celebrity. I'm going to start taking pictures of myself in a gown, posing, giving the people what they want. And so there was one analytic that I would always look at, and it was always disappointing to me, was that my engagement increased only when I posted a selfie. And so to me, that tells you everything you need to know about social media right there. 14 years of training, now close to 20 years of training, one, was not important, was no longer important. It was what I looked like. This is the world that we live in. And so this became a very harsh and sad reality to me, because then I would always say, why do I have to post a selfie when I worked my ass off, to learn my craft? What do I have to do with my craft outside of my hands and my heart? My face has nothing to do with that. And so I had this moral dilemma within me that just kept eating at me. And so I still posted what people wanted, right? Which was the selfie, the makeup, the glam, right? I still did it, but it was eating at me. And so what I started to notice was that I was giving them, the beast, what they wanted. The relationship shifted, the relationship changed. I became not Dr. Naz or Dr. Nazemzadeh anymore, or I know I shouldn't be texting you or messaging you over DM. It became, hi, Miriam, hi, Dr. Miriam, or just not even a greeting, just what they wanted without any, clue that, or didn't really care that I could be in surgery, could be with another patient, could be with my daughter, could be sleeping, could be on call. And so patients who hadn't come to see me yet were sending me pictures of their face. What do you think I should do? What do you think? What skincare do you think? Do you think I should choose this or this? It started to become a little ugly, and I started to see a different side of these followers. And so basically what I decided to do was I started to just observe, right? I started to feel a little uncomfortable, but again, take the emotions out, right? That's what they train you to do. That's what they train us to do. Take the emotions out, become objective, right? I started to feel angry. I started to feel devalued. How dare you, after all this training? But I stopped that feeling. I stopped that because I said, well, I created this beast. It's my fault. It's not their fault. I did this. And so now I have to fix it. And so what I started to realize was this pattern of accessibility. I became too accessible. My value was no longer there for patients, right? I had devalued myself in front of everyone. And so how do I get that back? And truly, again, it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. And what I thought was I had already sacrificed my teens, my 20s, my 30s Was I willing to sacrifice any more? And the answer was no. I truly was not willing to sacrifice an ounce more. And so I'm showing you these not as a way to poke fun at people, was just to show you, and these, as you can tell, these are from last week even. Hi, Dr. Naz. I was wondering if your office accepts care credit. Hi, Sherry. We sure do. Yay, thank you. Now, that is quite annoying, because guess what Sherry could have done? She could have and should have done. She could have called the office. But that's not the world that we live in. I allowed that. I allowed her to feel comfortable enough to message me and ask me that question. Next one. This is an old patient of mine, someone I've known since the beginning. Again, prospective patients become needy, but so do your loyal patients. Okay, help. Last night, now mind you, I'm an ophthalmologist. I don't do general ophthalmology anymore. I haven't done it in years. I'm a cosmetic and functional oculofacial plastic surgeon. This patient knows that. Last night I panicked that I'm trying to take out my contact, that it went behind my eye, and in the panic, I kind of scratched my eye. There was a little red spot at the moment, and then woke up to this. It's achy, but nothing more. How do I treat it or make it go away? Now, I know, as a board certified ophthalmologist and oculofacial plastic surgeon, that that's likely a subconjunctival hemorrhage or hematoma. That's nothing. A subconjunctival hemorrhage gets monitored, right? You just watch it. You encourage the patient to basically relax and reassure them that that'll go away. But how do I know that? How do I know that maybe this is an occult ruptured globe? I haven't examined her, right? And so this becomes a medical legal issue. If I give her advice and I am wrong, I will be held liable. Fact. This can be used in the court of law. And this is something that all of us need to wake up to. All of us. This is very scary. And so I told her, hi, blank HIPAA. She has allowed me to use her photographs. So otherwise I wouldn't be able to show you this photograph, but I have covered myself because I ask every single patient if I can use their photographs for education, marketing, and they have to check each box. She allowed for all. So I'm allowed to use her picture for education. Now, she does not know the capacity as to which I can use it, but I can use it. The same thing goes for you. If someone is giving you their medical information and you give them advice, you are now in a doctor-patient relationship that is binding, and that if you give them incorrect information, you will and can, but most likely will be sued, and you could lose your entire practice, everything that you trained for that. Now, this is more common because of the blogger world that we live in. Remember what I said about bloggers? She has asked me, this specific blogger has been trying to bait me for some time. Now, unfortunately, we're much smarter than bloggers. I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that in an objective way, fact. I asked her, because she kept baiting me, do you want to come in for a treatment? Because just get it out, just say it. And she said, hi, I wasn't sure. So I have had fillers done here in, I don't know where that is, for my under eyes. Oh, Barcelona. They told me to come back for a second session and maybe even a third, but I'm not happy with that they've done and wanted to come in and show you and see what you advise and if I should be even doing fillers for my under eyes. I was doing a partnership with them, but had mostly been doing facials and lasers, and then they offered this, so I trusted them. But not happy with it. I see more wrinkles now when I smile than before. So there's so many red flags here that I was too stupid to see before because nobody trained me to see these things. I had to learn this the hard way. I've been burned by bloggers multiple times now, to a point where I basically closed most of my relationships with them. And the ones that I have are the ones that are pretty innocent and are no longer really kind of a dangerous situation for me. So she's baiting me to get free treatment, number one. She wants to do a partnership. Now, mind you, you can buy followers, you buy likes. None of these bloggers have real data to show you because I asked to see their engagement now, and it's very hard for them to produce real things, but that's something that everyone should know. But more than anything, the biggest red flag is that she's already bad-mouthing someone that's given her free treatment. That's a terrible sign. You know, you're already quick to badmouth them to me on social media. So how do I know you're not going to do the same when someone else offers you a free treatment, right? And so these are things that are so small, but become so big for us because we are taught to take and trust and to don't ask questions and to keep your head down. But that is how the system has gamed us for too long. And so my goal is to teach you guys how to see these things so that the system can't game you the same way that it's gamed us. And so what I've learned is accessibility. So I hired a social media manager. Now, does my social media manager answer all my DMs? No, I still answer most of my own DMs because I am a doctor and you all will be too, and your work ethic is unlike anyone else. So I still handle most of my own social media, even though I pay someone else to do it. Don't ask, but that's what we do, unfortunately, because we can do it better. Fine. This was December 5th. Okay, let's give this a shot. First, I'm the one in a zillion who's allergic to Botox. No, you're not, because that's never been proven. Fine. And it's twin sisters. Again, impossible, but fine. Can't do it, but fillers are okay, thank God. I do not want a facelift, autoimmune condition, but my problem is volume loss. Perioral, excuse my phone. Let me just turn this off before I get distracted. Sorry about that, guys. It's probably my husband calling for help. Okay, so going back to this, I apologize. Okay, but my problem is volume loss, perioral wrinkling, and jawline heading south. Can fillers fix this at all? Love the way you do eye fillers or eyes with fillers. So could DEF do that? It's the wrinkles and nasal folds that get me every time. I love when they just like shorten things to sound like, you know, I just love that. I've been following you and keeping my eye open at your work. Pretty amazing. This is me. It's not my social media manager, although that is my social media manager. Immediately I said, stop. You are too comfortable already with me. So let's create some space, shall we? I'm sure you're a very nice lady. I'm sure you're wonderful, right? But the system has made us too accessible and the patients too comfortable. This is our fault, not theirs. Kind of theirs, but ours, mostly theirs. It's fine. We can figure that out later. So I responded as my social media manager, which I do now all the time. Hi, this is Persephone, Dr. Naz's social media manager. Best way to get her advice is by scheduling a consult. You can call either office to do that. Done. We're done now. I just closed that relationship. She will never DM me like that again, ever again. And so that is a small little step that was not taught to me that I had to learn the hard way, right? Because the beast almost took me down. And so I had to protect myself, and I still protect myself. If there's a situation I don't like, I don't respond anymore. I used to be so scared of losing patients or a bad review, but in the beginning, that's okay. But when you are valuable, which you all are from the beginning, they teach you to think you're not. And that's another issue with the system, is the tearing down, the talking down, the stepping down or on. You are valuable. From the moment that you step into the real world, you are valuable. Nobody has trained as hard as you. Nobody has worked as hard as you. Nobody deserves you like this. So remember that. Do not let them scare you or own you with a bad review. That is how the system is built, to make you fearful that you're going to lose patients. And I fell for it. I fell for it. I answered, I responded. I was so nervous. I'm a new cosmetic surgeon. Oh my God, if I get one bad review, this is the end. It's your body of work. So that's why your training has to be stellar. There cannot be an ounce of question in your own confidence. We all learn, we all make mistakes, of course. But the best thing you can do for yourself is study your behind off, train well, and the rest will be taken care of, as long as you know your own value. And so the beast had to go on a diet, and it was something, I overfed it. We had a moment together. And so, like I said, I hired, excuse me, a social media manager. And so my accessibility had to change. And I nearly had trained half of my life and I'd already given so much. Why am I giving more? Right? Like, that is not fair, nor should it even be asked for us to do, because no other profession asks this. No one else asks this. No one else does this other than us. And it's our profession's fault for making us believe that we have to keep feeding the beasts, including patients, now unfortunately social media, and now unfortunately with COVID. And so the reality is that we have given too much, all of us. And your generation can change that. It's on you guys at this point. And so I beg you all to really reevaluate how much you give, not when it comes to studying, because that's for your patients, but how much you give outside of that, your value, how much reimbursement you take, stuff like that. Those are conversations that we don't have, and we're told to just take whatever we are given without question. I am asking you to change that. So the medical system, in my opinion, has failed us in a lot of ways. And this is something that I will likely be crucified for at some point. And to be honest, I don't care anymore, because I made a vow to myself that I would never allow another person who has worked so hard, i.e. training doctors, to go through what we went through. And that's why the cycle continues, is because we were hurt so bad, that we're so burnt out, truly, that we don't know our way out of it, and we just cause more pain, and the cycle continues. It takes someone to break that cycle, and I want to be that for your generation, or I want to create a group that's like that for your generation. And so my purpose in starting the social media experience was simply it was to bring patients to my cosmetic practice, but it became something so different for me. There's a documentary that I'm forgetting, but I'm sure you guys remember. It was that documentary about doping with Lance Armstrong, and I think it was Invictus. But he started just to kind of see if he could trick the system and dope. And then what he found was this entire scheme that took down Lance Armstrong, this empire. And so in no way do I feel like I'm doing something to that extent, but it really reminded me of that, because I went in to do one thing, and then what I realized was something purely magical, in my opinion. And so the greatest lesson that I've learned, that I want to echo to you guys, that I want to share with you guys, is that we have value. And that's something that we're not taught in medicine. It's something that we're told that we don't, right? We're really, our value is based on numbers. Our value is based on a review, an assessment, a grade, but we're so much more than that, right? I can tell you right now, none of your friends who are outside of pre-med are sacrificing as much as you right now. That's a fact. None of your friends will continue to sacrifice as much as you. That's a fact. And so most of them will end up making more money than you if you continue this way. And so I'm asking you to take control of this profession. I'm asking you to wake up. You all are the social media generation, but you're also the generation that can change medicine for yourselves, not for me. It's too late for us, and that's okay. But like I said, if we do not speak for you guys, then medicine will do the same thing to you that it did to us. And so look at other businesses, look at other companies, Google, Facebook, Instagram, they're using us, and yet they treat their employees like gold, because they know the value of human performance, right? Their cafeterias are packed with healthy foods to keep their brains moving. Have you been to your recent cafeteria in your hospital? They have paid maternity and paternity leave, 3 months plus for both sometimes. You're lucky in private practice. You don't get any maternity leave. You certainly don't get paternity leave. In your training, you get none. And in hospitals, you maybe get 6 weeks, if that, and it's frowned upon. As females, if you pump, you're weak. If you take too much time off, you're weak. If you take a break for too long, you're weak. So no other business in 2020 thinks that way, and yet we still do. And so there has to be an awakening for all of you. And so medicine is an old system. It's old. Look back at your books. Look how medicine was. Nothing has changed. Our environment has changed, but we have not. And so the reason is, like I said, because we're burned out, the old system keeps getting handed down over and over. We don't have time to think or grow or progress because we're so tired. And honestly, I feel like the system is doing that for a reason. And so, very frank with you all, burnout is at an all-time high. Suicide for physicians is at an all-time high. Substance abuse is at an all-time high. Why is that? Don't turn away from those things. Don't ignore those things. Those are the things that will catch up to you. They all do. I did not think I was capable of burnout. I laughed at burnout. I thought, ha ha, people who burn out are so weak. It happened to me too, and it will happen to you. It will. It's not a matter of if, it's when. You can only keep pushing it away for so long. And so these are the questions that you have to ask yourself to avoid it. So my goal is to prepare you for what's coming. It's not easy, but it does. We don't have to make it harder for you guys, right? The idea that, well, I went through it, so you do, is crap, in my opinion, right? You know, I was in the generation of interns that we had Q2 overnight call with no hourly count. I was working 100 to 200 hours a week with no sleep, right? I accidentally, true story, I was so tired, I misspelled my own last name on a prescription for a controlled substance, and nobody sent me home. Nobody sent me home. The pharmacy called me and said, Dr. Nazemzadeh, you spelled, I mean, it's a hard last name. You spelled your last name wrong. Nobody sent me home. If that wasn't a call, a red flag, a cry for help, I do not know what is, but there is no one that's going to protect you guys other than yourselves. And my job is here, is in this lecture, is to wake you guys up. If a pharmacist in the hospital does not have a check and balance system to see that a doctor is too tired to perform, what kind of system is that? Athletes get breaks. The executives get breaks. We get no breaks. And yet we're asked to keep going and keep pushing. And then why are we burning out? Why are we burning out? Why? Right? It's probably your fault, right? You didn't do a good enough job balancing everything. You don't know how to balance work and life. You're not good at balancing. Those are the things that are told. Those are things that were told to me, that I wasn't good enough at balancing. Let me tell you, the idea of balance in medicine is impossible. Impossible. So it is not your fault. It is the system's fault. And my job is just for you to see it. So back to a ethical dilemma is my daughter. My daughter is now 3 years old. And so do I expose her to the same beast, right? Well, I have, and I'll tell you why. I am hopeful that things will change. I'm very hopeful that things will change because it can't continue this way. But I'm more hopeful because I believe in your generation. I know that you guys will change things. I know that you're aware of things that we weren't. And so my daughter is younger than your generation, but she's behind you guys. And so for her, ultimately, I want her to make the decision because I know social media will be different for her then. And I know it won't be the wild, wild west. So I'm open to it right now because I'm hopeful for the future. I know I sound kind of like a doomsday type of mentality, but it's not. It's not, because there are people like me now, and there are people like you that will change things. And I'm very, very, very hopeful. And I know that when you all are physicians, you'll have a very different lecture when you're giving this to pre-med students. It will be a happier social media experience. I know this as a fact. And so I simply just ask that you guys talk to one another. Don't be afraid of saying that you're tired, that you're burned out, that you can't. Don't be afraid of saying no. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably wrong. And listen to those things. Don't bury those feelings and those emotions that they tell you to bury. You should be able to eat and pee and use the bathroom. You know, I would operate for 12 hours, and if you asked for a break, you were weak. That's wrong. And I know that will change. And I know that there's systems in place to change it, but it requires young minds like yours to change it faster. And so that's my goal in this, and my plea to you all is to change is coming, but but I'm asking your help to make it happen a little bit faster for all of us. And so a little bit to the boring stuff, right? And I kind of mentioned that a little bit. Instagram is not HIPAA compliant, right? And so you technically, once you give advice, you're in a medical legal issue immediately, because that information in the court of law can be used, right? A screenshot, that's it. Just like I just took that screenshot, right? A patient will do the same thing. They'll show it to other doctors when they get second opinions. I've had patients show me their DMs to other doctors as well. They don't care. They don't care about their privacy. That's why they're sending you a DM about their personal information. So you just have to understand that there's really this kind of imbalanced idea of privacy between you and the patient. And so keep that holy, keep HIPAA, it's there for a reason. And you know, things that we think are annoying are actually, those are the systems in place to protect us. So that's one of them. That's good. So yeah, HIPAA is a real thing, and it's one of the things that will save you. And like I said, just don't give advice over social media, period. Even, you know, I'm guilty of doing this with my current patients right now, and I'm retraining myself to stop. Even with my current patients, I tell them, you have to call the office, we have to document appropriately, just for your safety. I always make it about them, just for your safety, because it really is. Also, you don't know, you know, unfortunately, you could get hacked, you could get this. And so, you know, you don't want your medical information out there in the virtual world or in the cloud or wherever it is. And so I always say that, you know, you have to protect your privacy, because it really is for them, right? I'm going to end up answering the question anyway. It's so much easier for me to just answer it on DM and be done with it, versus them calling the office, having my medical staff put in a phone call note, me documenting the phone call note, having to either call the patient back or then have my office call. So it adds 10 extra steps. But in reality, it's for our patients, right? Again, it's that Hippocratic oath of, we all have, you know, an oath, or you took an oath, or you will take one, to do no harm. And so you have to protect your patients, not about you only. So my takeaways in general, and I'm sorry this is going a little bit longer, I want to open the mic for questions if anyone's interested, but social media should be used, right? Like I said, this is not doomsday. This is not to scare you. It should be used to build your reputation and to build your quote unquote brand. But your brand should be you. It shouldn't be a virtual you. It shouldn't be this idea of like your projected you, or whatever they call it, your avatar and Social Dilemma. It really should be you. And what I used to think was that I could, you know, people are stupid, I'm smarter, I'm a doctor. I mean, truly, these are, you know, little dark moments that we all have, but it should be done strategically, right? The idea isn't to trick people, but it's to protect you and the patient, right? Your medical, legal, HIPAA, the patient's privacy and safety. And so if it becomes a second job, don't do it, because that's when I started to hate Instagram. That's when I called it, when it became the beast, right? I hated it. And even now, you know, I play around with the idea of what happens if I just delete my account. I play around with that idea at least once a week. You know, I'm like, what if I'm hidden and nobody can find me? And it's such an attractive idea, much more attractive to me than having like 1 million followers. The idea of becoming completely inaccessible on social media, to me, is the most attractive thing about all of it, which is so funny, because it's kind of where I started. I started kind of hating social media, not believing in it. And it's kind of where I am right now. I still do it because that's where we are, but you know, I don't know if I'll continue, just because if it continues this way, I probably won't. And that's a real fact. That's a reality. Don't feel pressured or obligated to be something that you're not, because it's comparison. It's the world of comparison, that this doctor or this person is doing something and has more patients than I do. So let me do what they're doing. And let me tell you, local doctors, and this is by no way or means to brag, have, you know, reached out to the blogger that I had worked with previously to, you know, those things don't bring you patients. You bring yourself patients, and your work brings you patients, and your ethical standards bring you patients, and your trust brings you patients. Those are added bonuses. And so, yeah, social media can help with that, but it's not you. It's not how your revenue source is. And if we were in this for money, and we should be, ultimately, we should be, compensated fairly, medicine isn't the celebrity lifestyle that people think it is. There's a lot of grit to it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in it, right? We're people who work and who aren't afraid of work, and we're selfless. And I think that selflessness can sometimes be taken advantage of. And that's what I want to protect in you guys, is that beautiful trait that attracted you to medicine really should stay there. It shouldn't really go away ever, because that's what makes you an incredible doctor. And so I am, as you can tell, kind of obsessed with the idea of social media. I watched this series. I tell you, hopefully some of you have, but my age group, everyone makes fun of me for watching these things, but it's a Netflix, it's basically a game, and it's called The Circle. And I think they've done it in different countries. And I know you guys have probably watched it or know all about it, because I don't know your generation and what you guys are into as well as I know mine. But I understand your generation more and more through social media. But what I thought was so interesting about this was that it basically showed that the world is very, very sensitive to being genuine, and that being fake or being not yourself is always picked up. And I thought I could, not catfish people, but I think a lot of people think they can be something that they're really not on social media. But people pick that up. And I did not think that was possible, especially with, I hate to say that, your generation and younger, because I thought we could outsmart you guys. But it seems like you guys are pretty darn smart, and you guys are the ones that pick up the genuineness. So remember that, because your audience is going to look and judge you for your ability to be yourself as well. So you guys are very smart, but so are other people. And so my overall take of 2020, I pray to God that this video works, because I think it's amazing. So pardon me while I go to it. And if it doesn't work, let me open it to questions if I can. I don't think it's going to work, but you know what I'll do? It's basically a video. It's still uploading. It's basically a video of my daughter, and it's probably the funniest thing that you'll ever see. But let's open it up for questions, and I'll keep my screen here. Yeah, this is all my daughter. You guys can see the embarrassing things.
First of all, thank you so much. This was such an amazing session. We were all blown away this whole time.
Oh, I'm so happy.
It was so eye-opening, and we're just so thankful you shared all this wisdom with us, because we know that it took you a long time to kind of understand, and you're still understanding. Yeah. So thank you for feeling comfortable enough to share that with us.
I want to share something really quick. We had a comment from Samuel that said, thank you, Dr. Nazemzadeh. I came here to learn about some trees and came out with a view of the forest. And I think that's so beautiful.
That basically is exactly what I wanted. So that means everything to me.
And there's definitely lots of comments saying that you yourself should actually make a documentary, and we completely agree.
I would love to. I would love to. Honestly, guys, I think this is my purpose is to do this for you guys. It's something that I wish that we were just taught, and I think the ugly is hidden, and people feel like you have to, go through the ugly yourself as a doctor to get the lesson, and I could not disagree with that more.
Yeah, we're so thankful. We just can't put it into words how thankful we are. We said people are saying that you should do season 2 of The Social Dilemma, so you should look into that.
There's a medicine one. I would love to. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to, but I have to be honest. I think it's really scary for a lot of people, and I think your generation is ready to hear it. I don't know if that's true for other people. I don't know if it's even true for my generation. We're not that open yet. I come from a very different world. A lot of people don't even think what I'm saying is real, because my partner doesn't even know what a hashtag is. I mean, this is real. She doesn't, the concept of a hashtag, I have to explain to her still, and she just doesn't get it. So it's, for us, you guys know so much more than we do, and your brains are so much more open and just exciting to me that it's just awesome. I'm very excited for you guys.
I think we'll do just a couple of questions. There was a ton, but we don't want to keep you too long either. We know you're locked in.
I will answer as many questions as you guys want me to. I really mean that.
I think one of the main questions that people had throughout the whole session was what advice do you have for students and their social media accounts? Because we often are told to keep everything private when you're applying. You don't want your employers to see, but you kind of had that open social media idea. So what is your advice for us, like in our stage of life?
Yeah, so I have to tell you, this presentation, I'm so glad that you asked that. Could have been like 5 hours, because it was like so many things that kept coming, and I didn't even know. That's why I was up so late, because I didn't know how to like grasp all of this. And when I responded so quickly with that title, because these amazing women, love you guys too, but reached out to me, and I was like, yes, social media. And then I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Because I'm like, oh my God, it's an hour. This could be like 10 hours. So I love that you guys asked this question. And like I said, I'm happy to answer your questions, because I feel like this could go on forever. And as I don't want to take your time as well, because your time is precious as well. But I will say that I, as an employer, right, to someone that would be coming into my practice, I would want to see your social media. I would want to know your personality. I would want to know you, right? I feel like I can sense who people are from their social media. And by the way, even if you're private, there's a way that they'll get it. There's a way that they'll come into your private account. So don't think that just because you're private, you're safe. I can tell you this, and this is something that I learned later in my own practice, which is not something that I advise and I don't stand by. And it's something that I actually asked to stop. And these are ethical things that will happen in private practice, to a point where it makes you question, your standing every day in your job. But that's neither here nor there. But there's the person who hires the private account that seems very, very much like a nothing account, right? And they request people at a time where it doesn't appear like it's a person that's applying for a job. Does that make sense? So you all are very young and innocent, just like I was, and hopefully still am a little bit, but they will figure it out eventually. They will get into your account eventually. So don't feel safe. If anything, in my opinion, be open about it, right? Anything that you have on your social media, private or not, assume can and will be used against you. So that should be period, right? Private or not private. Anything that is, anytime I make a post, anytime, I think in 10 years, in 20 years, if I see this, my daughter sees this, my family sees this, will I still be proud of it? Period. That's how I post. Now, I think that's a big undertaking, right? Because you guys should still have fun with it. But also, you guys, I would be so weirded out if you didn't like have a drunk selfie and like be partying with your friend. Good. That means to me that you lived your life. You like had your experience. You got it out of your system. I don't have to worry about like you partying on the job or drinking. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think that's the shift that I want to happen even in the generations above me, to say that we have no right, just because ours wasn't monitored. We all did it, but we just didn't have it documented, right? So we got to do it in secret. You guys don't. And they can't stick their little finger and say, oh, look, you did this. Well, you did it too. You know what I mean? So in my opinion, be yourselves. Like, just think of it for yourself. Don't think of it for anyone else. That's my biggest advice. Is this is going to sound horrible, but F everyone else. And at the end of the day, no one else but you matters. You go to bed at night, you have to treat the patients the way that you treat them. You put your head down to sleep. Who cares what they think? So be yourselves. Do whatever. Your whole life is a ball of crappy sacrifice. So if this one little escape that you have is taken away from you, that's not fair. So do you, but make sure that you're proud of yourself.
I'm trying to go through all the questions. There's a lot of questions.
Okay, I think there was a good one I found while you looked on it. There was a question kind of talking about, how do you feel, I guess this is more your opinion, so if you don't want to answer, you can let us know. But there are a lot of like pre-med students that are now, especially with like the COVID vaccine coming out, trying to explain like evidence-based information about a vaccine, which we're still not like, although we're pursuing that avenue, we're not really experts in yet. We're not certified to talk about it. Like, is that something that, you know, you would advise against? Because there are a lot of like pre-med blogs and stuff like that.
So you guys are not as blinded like we are, right? We're taught to accept everything we're told. When an attending would tell us something, you say, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. They say jump, you say how high. That's how I was trained. I was trained, I was sexually harassed. I was pushed out of the OR. I had a scalpel thrown at me. That's how I was trained. Now, when my generation, when you're told to take something, you do it. No questions asked, right? We have to get a flu shot every year. You don't ask questions. If you do ask questions, your privileges will be taken away. If you don't want the flu shot, you can't operate here, right? So I believe that everyone has to do their research. And you all have information that's much more vast than what we had. And what I'm realizing is that there's a lot more information out there that is critical, right? And just because, they're quick to say, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. Oh, you think your kids get autism if you vaccinate them. That to me is very fear-based and very elitist and also very polarizing, because you should be allowed to ask questions and you should be able to ask questions without being crucified. So that is a wonderful question. So I think how I would say this is that I don't think right now, if you were to ask me, would I get the vaccine right now? I would say, I don't know. And that's a very honest answer. I don't know, because I haven't done enough research. And research to me is no longer just what I read in PubMed and this and that. Research to me is like, I even watch YouTube now. I have Reddit. I have things that are, not controlled by another party or whatever it is, that's independent. And so I think you guys have, you guys probably know so many more of these sites. Like, I just figured out Reddit. I'm like, what is this? So you guys know these things much more than I do. So I would say for you guys, question it, really question it for yourselves. And when you question it, it doesn't mean that you have to share it with the world or even your patients, but do it for yourself until you feel comfortable that you've gathered enough information to make a recommendation for yourself and your patients, because your family members are going to start asking you questions like this, and you don't want to freak them out. My family members every year, are you going to get the vaccine? And I don't be like, well, I don't know. And it freaks them out because they're like, well, what do you mean you don't know? And so you have a responsibility, you're people's messenger, right? You are the messenger between this area in medicine that they're like, oh my God, it's like this godlike thing, and then the regular people, and you'll be that for your family for the rest of time. And so it's a lot of pressure, and it's a big burden, but it's the oath, it's what you took, it's what you chose. So I hate to say, if I don't know yet, I don't know if I'm going to take the vaccine.
That's fair and valid. So thank you for sharing that with us. We'll respect your decision. So thank you for sharing your personal opinions on that. People are wondering, what are your thoughts on these kind of kind of what Yasmin was saying, there's medical students and then there's residents who have their pages and share medical advice. When do you think that line is? When do you think that someone has enough training to start sharing with a wide audience?
Basically, when you become an attending and you hit your ass on the ground multiple times. I mean, you've been punched around a bunch, not by someone who is an attending. I'm talking a patient, or you've had a bad experience, or you've hit the ground. Otherwise, you should not speak. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that in a real way. You don't know anything. I mean, I thought I was the greatest thing that ever happened when I became a resident. I was like, oh, I'm a doctor. You walked into the hospital. I'm sorry, the nurses know more than you. Fact, right? Period. And the nurses who are 20 years still know more than you, right? So even when you're done with residency. So nobody, in my opinion, even me, I struggle with sounding self-righteous or giving advice unless my ass has been burned. That's when you give advice. Otherwise, the whole, a lot of you have been asking, that's my new series, is a lot of you have been asking. Nobody's asked. Nobody cares. That's literally, and that's my whole thing, is now I want to make fun of that culture because nobody cares. Nobody, who are you? That's literally. So, you know, there's someone in my field who does it, and it's like, you're like, oh my God. And people who are older than me are like, oh, that's so great. And I'm like, is it great though? Like, what do you know? And so it's not to make fun. It's more like, you don't know. I want to see like the hair. Like, I want to see I want to see the sweat. I want to see the tears in your eyes when you tell me something. You know, it's like, you don't ask a woman who's never had a child for parental advice. I learned that. I went to my mother. I was like, what the hell am I doing? I didn't go on social media to a 12-year-old, right, who got pregnant a day ago and now is an expert in maternity and health. So that is what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that you can't give advice, but at the point that you are right now, I would be discussing your journey, your pre-med journey. You are the expert in that. You're the expert in your pre-med journey. You can give advice because you've been burned by it to someone right now in high school. That is your platform. That is your audience. That's your expertise. So speak in your expertise. Otherwise, it's just, in my opinion, everyone has a responsibility to one another. We all do. So we can't abuse that power.
Yeah, I think that's very fair and valid, and very true. We all agree with that. I think let's say an hour and a half. I think we might wrap up here.
Okay.
Lana, you're kind of lagging, so I'll kind of finish that up for you. Yeah, so I guess we'll leave with one last question.
Sure.
As we are kind of navigating through, hopefully, what seems like the tail end of the pandemic, but you know, who knows? What advice would you leave us as college pre-med students hoping to get into medical school and make a difference in the world?
I think keep your innocence true in your heart. It will be attempted to be stolen from you. I know that sounds psychotically scary, but it is. What you see in the hospitals right now is what's really happening, and what's just happened on a smaller scale for a long time. Doctors are always the last in line. Nobody cares about our health. Nobody cares about our well-being. You can see that in the system. You can see what's happening with COVID. Frontline workers have been doing this since March. They don't care, right? People don't wear their masks. They don't really care if a doctor dies or a nurse dies or a janitor dies, but really they don't care if a healthcare worker dies. So what I would tell you is this, you all have to keep that innocence, and while at the same time valuing yourself and respecting yourselves, right? There's a really big shift that's going to happen. And the shift starts from, I think, your perception and your own reality of how you should be treated. And I think moving forward, you all have to protect yourselves and your health first, right? And then medicine comes second, which is something I would never have said before. I would have told you that your life is medicine. Suck it. Too bad. This is the life that you wanted. You chose it. Sorry. Now it's different for me. Your health is number one, your family is number one, and everything else is second. So if it's too much, if it's affecting your health, if it's affecting your relationships, it's not worth it.
Thank you so much for your advice. There's so many people just saying that this was such an incredible session, and you brought a light that, you know, not a lot of doctors are willing to talk about. So everyone appreciated it. Lana and I were texting the entire time, just being like, oh my God, she made such a good point. So we appreciate you so much. And if you open up the chat,
all of you.
Yeah, if you open up the chat, there's so many people just saying thank you so much, and they appreciate it. And some of them, a lot of them actually, would love to have you back to talk some more.
I would love to do this.
Yeah.
I would love to.
Yeah, we'll definitely try to set something up for next semester. So that would be awesome. But thank you so much for giving us your time. We know you're locked away, but
your time is just as valuable as mine. So thank you all.
Yeah.